Hello, dears. So this is part two because obviously the last video fucked up, didn't it? Now maybe I should keep the screen on there so I can see it if it fucks up. But then I don't like that because then I'm just constantly looking at myself as how beautiful am I at this moment now? How beautiful am I at this moment now? How beautiful am I at this moment now? Don't I look like I actually am Ganesh? And his little hands are my little extra hands in the background. There he is, there he is, there he is. So I'm going to have to, I'll check on the video every now and again, like every sort of 5 minutes I'll check to see if it's fucked up. Okay, so let's carry on. I started off talking about Ward 12 on the last video, and then I was trying to say, well, how did I become violent? And then I said, oh, right, well, the tensions in the family were high and had been high for a long time. And I guess we were just involved in this mass enmeshed drama of war of the worlds kind of thing, like a war of views, a war of minds, a war of psychologies, a war of religions. That's a good way to talk about it. So if I went into a spiritual New Age religion, this was clashing very strongly against my dad's atheist religion. And I am going to call it a religion because he defended it as staunchly as someone would defend a religious view. Probably even more staunchly. He was very, very rigid in his defense of atheism, and he was very quick to denigrate religion and to speak of how religion is a negative force in the world and how it doesn't have any positive value and how it's wars created for the sake of religion and how churches abuse their power. So he was very, very critical of all religions, in fact, apart from Buddhism, because he didn't count that as a religion because he said it was a philosophy, right? Philosophy of life. So, as I was saying in the last part, so I got into this New Age stuff. Sorry about the sniffage. I got into this New Age stuff, which was anachronistic. What do these words mean? I love this word, anachronistic, but I don't actually fully know what it means. Every time I think of it, I think, I like that word. But what does it mean again? Anachronistic, belonging to a period other than being portrayed. All right. Okay. Well, what I meant was anarchistic. Anarchical? Anarchy. An anarchistic person believes in anarchism. Anarchistic activity or literature promotes anarchism. Well, tell me what it means then, you bastards. Anarchy. Anarchy is a society, entity, group of people, or a single person that rejects hierarchy. I think I'm an anarchist to that degree then. I don't like hierarchy. I can't deal with it. Why are you bigger than me or higher than me? The only way I can understand hierarchy is if there's a hierarchy of roles, but not a hierarchy of people. Does that make sense? So I'm going to draw a picture about this. This is what I think about hierarchy. It's useful in that you need leaders and you need structures in order to have things working effectively. But what happens, as I think, is that you get a hierarchy where someone's big and then someone's smaller in terms of roles. This is not how I thought it would be. Yeah. So the hierarchy is like, I'm number 1, you're number 2, you're number 3, and you're number 4, and you're the winner. You're the lowest lowest role, and I'm the highest role. But what this thing underneath of it here says is that we are all still equal human beings. The circles at the bottom there symbolize being equal human beings, and we're all connected as well. So the roles may show that, yes, okay, I'm in a higher situation, I'm in a higher position of power, I have higher responsibilities, I have more responsibilities, I do have say over you as number 2, and number 2 has say over number 3 and 4 and so on, like that. But there has to be, I think, and understanding that, okay, after the work or whatever tasks are being looked at, after those things are achieved, and even before those are achieved, and while they're being achieved, there needs to be an underlying assumption that we are still all equal as people, because I think that's what gets forgotten. So if you have a hierarchy where you've got someone at the top and then people below them, whatever, if you just think that that's the only truth in this pyramid structure of a hierarchy, that the low ones are of less value somehow, then that's incorrect, because as you see in this pyramid structure, these are supposed to be all equilateral triangles, by the way, and they are actually all equal. So each person in that is equal as a person. I'll just put the circles in there. They are all equal as people, but they just happen to be arranged in a hierarchy that helps an organization of people or society to function more effectively for the benefit of all the people involved. And what I think tends to happen in authority structures is that the people at the top think that they have more personhood than the people at the bottom. So the person at number one somehow thinks he's more of a person than the person at number two, number three, and number four. And so the person at the top, it thinks that the circle symbolizes a sense of personhood or sense of self. He thinks he's actually a bigger person. He thinks he's actually better as a person overall than 2 and 3 and 4. Whereas the reality of the situation underneath is that each person is equal in terms of their spirit or their soul or their humanness. And that is the baseline understanding that we should all consider as being the ultimate truth of ourselves. So that's my feeling about hierarchies, is why I tend to have an issue when people think they're more than me or better than me just because they happen to be in a role that says they have more power. Because there is a difference between someone who knows that they're an equal human being, they're just in a position of power, and someone who thinks that they are a powerful person because of their position. They think that they're a very important person because their position says so. But this person here thinks they're just as equal as everyone else, but their position is where they are, if that makes sense. Because I've encountered people who are like this number one person, who are just totally up their own arse and totally obsessed with their power and totally think they run the whole world in their sphere of influence, and they can treat anyone like anything because they're the big circle and anyone below them is a smaller circle, so therefore they are not equal anymore. They're a bigger person, more important, more powerful, right? And that just creates a horrible relationship dynamic between number one and number four, or even number 1 and 2 or 3. So I've met dicks like this, number one, and they don't realise that we're all equal. And that pisses me off, because I'm like, I know I'm equal to you, and you're acting as though you're better than me. And it's creating a disproportionate sense of nonsense. But then I have also met people like this, who are in a position of power, who see themselves as an equal to me and whoever else. So that's what I think of hierarchy. How did I get into hierarchy? Anarchy? Oh, God. This is just Ross talks his mind out, isn't it, really? It's nothing. So my worldview was anarchistic, in contrast to my dad's worldview, because I was eschewing, if that was a good word, I was saying no to the idea of a hierarchy within the family system. Deliberately avoid using. Yes, I was trying to say no to a hierarchy in the family system. Yeah, that actually makes sense for once. I've actually said something that, with big words, actually makes sense. Let me go blow my nose. This thing's fucking annoying. Wow. Enjoy Ganesh for a bit. What the hell is the point of that? I'm blowing my nose, nothing's coming out. Makes me angry, that does. What's the fucking point of blowing your nose if nothing's going to come out? And yet, I can guarantee it's still going to keep going when I talk. Oh, bollocks to it all. Right. So, I slapped my dad because he was a dick. As we know, according to the Bible's rules, honour thy father and mother, love the only one true God as your God, and do what you like. Yeah, so I slapped my dad. Not my proudest moment. Maybe it is my proudest moment. Maybe I'm lying. Maybe it was my proudest moment. It wasn't my proudest moment. But then maybe I think I'm saying, I'm trying to get to an authentic point here. I think I'm saying it's not my proudest moment because I feel I have to say it's not my proudest moment. Does that make sense? I know it was wrong, but maybe I don't actually know it's wrong. I don't think I know that it was wrong. I think I know that people would think it's wrong, but I don't know that it's wrong. Not yet. Maybe there isn't a yet. There's a tendency here inside myself to try and minimize the appearance of me being a bad person. So I'm having this impulse to try and like make myself seem like a decent human being, whereas actually in that moment I don't think I counted as a decent human being when I slapped my dad. I wasn't being a decent human being. But then I'm trying to like account for it later on and trying to make it seem like I am a decent human being now and I wouldn't do that now. But I'm also trying to minimize the devastation of that action as well. So again, getting stuck on that thing where I'm still trying to make allowances for myself or make excuses for myself in the past or cover for myself somehow by saying like, oh yeah, it was a spiritual decision to slap my dad. Maybe it was. But I just feel this conflict with, I can't actually seem to say how I really thought about it. Because I genuinely thought I was doing the right thing. Honestly, I thought I was doing the right thing. I had no other thing in my mind to do. I could not see a way to get him off my case. He was in my face. He'd stolen my passport. He was lying to me. And then he was following me around and wouldn't leave me alone. So, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm trying to justify it. And maybe I need to justify it as well. Then maybe I actually need to justify my own actions until I don't need to justify my actions anymore. I think I need to say, look, the situation was horrible. I had no other course of action. I didn't know what else to do. It was the only thing there was left to do from my point of view at that time. Was to slap him. Because I genuinely thought that it would shut him up and get him off my case, but it didn't. I thought it would snap him out of this hounding thing. He was kind of hounding me all the time. And I actually genuinely thought that it would snap him out of it, and it didn't. So yeah, I got to let myself off the hook of that eventually one day. I can't carry that forever. I say this every time I talk about it. I can't even feel sorry for him though, still in that environment. I just think if I imagine back to that memory of, so it was me, my mum, my dad, and my brother all outside my bedroom. I was banging on the drums, making a scene because I was trying to kind of manipulate my parents to tell me the truth. I was trying to get the truth out of them by causing a scene. I thought that if I make a big scene about it, they'll want to calm me down and that they will therefore just surrender in a way, just surrender and tell me the truth instead. And I can't express just how infuriating it is to have someone plain-faced lie to you when you know the truth. And And in fact, that's a good symbol for the whole of this psychosis thing. So from my perspective, I knew something deeper than my parents were aware of at the time, and I knew it to be truth. So I felt like my parents were living a sham life, a fake life, an inauthentic life, an on the surface life, a habitual life, an uncreative life, an unfelt life, a robotic life, a mechanistic life. Okay, a hollow life. They only ever operated in fixed roles and patterns, and the amount of times I heard the words, "Your tea's on the stairs, Ross. Your tea's on the stairs, Ross. Your tea's on the stairs, Ross." Every time I would be asked for tea, that was like a habitual thing. Do you want a cup of tea? 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 And usually you just have to say yes or no. And if I said yes, then the next thing that would happen would be, "Your tea's on the stairs, Ross," in exactly the same voice pattern. And it was just so habitual. The whole family system was so habitual. That didn't give any room for real, authentic relating. No one was relating to each other. Only roles were relating to each other. We were just relating to each other through our roles. And I'd broken out of that by that point. So I had the truth. They didn't know the truth because they were unwilling to see the truth. They were unwilling to see themselves as playing roles. They were still stuck within those roles. And this was the crux, really, of the war between me and my family, and mainly between me and my dad, because my dad was the firmest, most rigid role player of them all. My mum was a little less rigid. My brother didn't really have a solid definition of what his role was, but my dad had a very fixed mental approach to belief systems and what was tolerable, behaviors and what was correct and what was normal, and feelings, what feelings were right and wrong. And basically he was the head of the family, and so it was like he was kind of the king in a way. He had the biggest chair, for one thing. He had the biggest chair in the house, and it was in the middle of the room. He always had the biggest chair, because he had back problems, but it just basically made him into the king. He had a throne. He actually had a giant back adjusting chair, which was for him, and everyone else had to be on the sides, like on normal chairs, as in like on sofas or whatever. But he had this sort of giant back correcting throne chair that went backwards and stuff. So he had the say over the whole house. He was a patriarch. He was the king of the house. All the financial decisions were made by him. All decisions, actually, about pretty much anything that happened in the house came from my dad. And there would be arguments if people didn't go the way that he said was right, or that he wanted to, basically. So he was manipulative as well, and controlling. He was a controlling, manipulative patriarch. The house is actually designed on the interior by my dad, pretty much. He made lots of things in the house. The desk here is made by him. I believe the shelves are made by him. This shelf is made by him. Everything's installed by my dad. So I can't really remember ever having like other men in the house, like worker men, if you know what I mean, to do painting and decorating or anything. It was all done by him, or him and my mum. But the decisions of the decor were my dad's decisions. We've got mirrors all over the house because those are the decisions that my dad made. And there were decisions that no one else really had a vote on. I think he would pay lip service to my mum having a vote on it, but he was basically a patriarchal egomaniac. That his way is the right way because he is the king of the house. It's the best way I can put it. He's got a throne, and he had a back injury, which sort of gave him license, if you like, to have this special dispensation in the family as well. So he kind of played a wounded victim and also an authoritarian, patriarchal person, an overlord. He was a moral overlord, and he was an intellectual overlord as well. So moral meaning he knew what was right in terms of behavior, and intellectual in terms of he knew what was right in terms of views and thinking and ideas. So he was also an overlord of my career for a while. He, because he had his own business, still does have his own business. He's got 2 businesses and other bits and bobs he does as well. He was kind of the director of my band for a little while, the manager, self-appointed, by the way. And I played this deferential role, so I would defer my decisions to him, or I'd run past all my decisions. I'd always run my decisions past my dad. And I continued to do that throughout the whole of my adult life until about the age of 27, 28, which is where this story is moving towards. That's the 2014 marker point. So all my important decisions, I would run past my dad, which that might sound like a normal thing to do in a way, but this was to the point that, okay, so if my dad says yes to it, that's good. If my dad says no to it, then I'm at a loss. So I don't actually have the choice, really, to have my own decisions. My dad also was the arbiter. I'm using all these big words at the moment. Arbiter. He handed out moral decrees on health as well. Yeah, arbiter. He's the final arbiter. The person with the power to decide a dispute. He's a judge. Yes, judgmental person. He was the final arbiter on health. So he would be directional in terms of how to have good health, what you should eat. Exercise was encouraged. And he would be very critical and condescending about fast food, junk food, McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, greasy food, eating too much, drinking too much. He's a fucking control freak basically. And he would explain it all away by having had a difficult childhood at boarding school. So in a way he had a watertight defense so that we couldn't really ever penetrate that to find a flaw and to say, okay, no, you're actually wrong. My brother did. My brother would argue with my dad all the time, sometimes, just on views, on behavior, and everything. My brother was kind of the counterpoint to my dad to begin with anyway. And I just, during that time when my brother would always be arguing with my dad, so my dad would have views about what was right, or beliefs even, what was the correct belief, and my brother and he would argue. And while I would hear them arguing, I had learned by that point that it's easier to be quiet and easier to not argue. And I might have even said to my brother, look, just be quiet, just let him win. So I'd already taken on a kind of subdued role in my expression of my beliefs. And honestly, I didn't really have beliefs as a teenager. I didn't have beliefs, I didn't have views, I didn't have opinions. I didn't really have likes and dislikes. I mean, I did, but I didn't really know them, if that makes sense. So I liked Nirvana because my friends liked Nirvana. I played guitar because my friends played guitar, to begin with anyway. So everything was outsourced to someone else's opinion because I just didn't have my own opinions or ideas. The only things that I had opinions or ideas within were my creativity, so my drawings, which were, drawings and music and lyrics eventually, because they didn't come from anywhere else but from inside of me. So I had ideas about how I wanted to draw things and what I wanted to draw and to make jokes and stuff, and they didn't come from anywhere else. And also it's like you can't really argue with that because it's not an argument, it's not something to be argued with. You can't say, oh, that doesn't exist. and have it be true. It just doesn't make any sense. But I didn't really have likes or dislikes that were my own. I liked whatever anyone else liked. I liked whatever the dominant opinion was. Whoever had a more dominant opinion than mine, I would agree with them. I did sort of have perceptions and insights, and I remember sort of trying to compare what I thought about certain singers in music to what other people thought, and I'd always feel like I'd lost. I always felt like other people had a stronger opinion than I did, and therefore they were right. I remember like trying to say what I think the ideal singer for a rock musician would be, and it would have been. I remember saying it would be a combination of Kurt Cobain, the guy from Creed, and I might have put Nickelback in there. I can't remember honestly. And I said to my friend Jim, that would be like the ultimate combination of a voice for me. And he said no, and said something else. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm wrong then. So I always felt like I was wrong. I always felt like my opinion was incorrect, that my ideas didn't have value because, I don't know, I just didn't know what I really liked. I mean, I kind of had feelings, and I remember feeling and thinking things, but never being able to articulate them to the point where I could hold my ground on something. I never really held my ground on anything. And in fact, I would try and hold my ground on something with regard to an opinion, and then I would sort of roll off the opinion and turn it into a joke instead. So let's say like this is the opinion, and I'm trying to sort of push this opinion and say this is what I think, and I'd go, oh, bollocks to it, I'll just laugh around and joke instead. So I'd just kind of melt, and because I couldn't win, I would just surrender instead and do something silly. So yeah, weird. Where is this all coming from? This is not where I was supposed to be going. I slapped my dad. I slapped him. And I can understand why I slapped him, because the contentions between me and my dad were just furious. They were furious. We were always fighting for about 2 years. Fighting. And he just would not relent. He was just pushing this psychosis view to me, and I was pushing back with this spirituality, new age view, and not being as strong-willed as my dad, I just didn't have the ability to communicate that as forcefully, and I couldn't shut him up. I remember when I say they, I mean my parents and family friends all had an argument with me, basically, or a suppressing, moralizing argument, intellectual argument with me when I'd become vegan. And they were just trying to kind of destroy my point of view, basically. So I'd said that I was vegan and I didn't want to eat meat or animal products at all, cheese and ham and eggs and fish and all that. So I'd become a vegan. And then I just got this ridiculous grilling, pun, a vegan grilling, by my family. And I think there was family friends there as well during this particular discussion, where they basically tried to say, no, you shouldn't believe that, or you shouldn't have that lifestyle choice, and in fact your reasoning for it is all wrong anyway, so don't be a vegan, and here are the intellectual philosophical reasons why you're wrong for being a vegan. And I just felt like I was under attack during that conversation, like I wasn't being allowed to hold my view. I remember I was shaking. I probably ended up crying, I think, a bit. And I just remember feeling like, oh, for you it's just a kind of little discussion, but for me you're actually all ganging up on me and trying to destroy my lifestyle or my worldview. So it's not fair, really, because you're all against me. and you're not giving me the right to my own opinion. You're not giving me the right to my view. Yeah, so I'd started to change my worldview to being alternative, ecological, green, spiritual, compassionate, ethical, la la la, social justice warrior type of person. And my dad mainly, it always goes back to my dad. I mean, my mum, you see, my mum was more of the emotional side of the family, but she also didn't have views. I don't think she was allowed to have views, honestly. She wasn't allowed to view the TV, in fact. This goes back to the patriarchy again. So my dad being the king of the house, having this big fat chair in the middle because of his back, he had control of the remote as well. So we could ask him to change the channel to such and such, but the decision had to go through him because he would have the remote, because he was the one in power, you see. He was the king of the house, like typical patriarchy type of thing. So we had to whine and nag for me, my brother, and my mum to get whatever it was that we wanted to watch. And the decision had to go through him because he had assumed his role as king of the house, father in chief, patriarch of the family. And there was no way to challenge him. You couldn't challenge him on that. So, like, even down to something as small as the TV remote and the channel that's being watched, he had control over. And it was his decision whether he let us watch what we wanted to watch. So it wasn't even our decision to just watch what we wanted to watch on TV. It was our decision passed through him, if that makes sense. So I think you could probably see why I started to go against my dad was because he was in a rigid power position in the house, and I'd realised that this is not correct. This is not egalitarian. This is not democratic, even. This is not. This has no equality between people here. There's far too much power concentrated in my dad's decision making. And so, actually, if I look at it, another way to view my psychosis was a way to return equality to the family members. Because I remember a lot of my activities was about trying to free us up as a family from our rigid roles. The family was work addicted as well. The family was work addicted and TV addicted. So my dad was TV addicted, my mum was TV addicted, my brother was TV addicted, my brother was computer games addicted, still is, kind of. What was I addicted to? Achievement, school achievement. My dad was addicted to work, my mum was addicted to work. I don't know whether my brother was addicted to school achievement, maybe not. But yeah, and I knew that. I knew that as soon as I'd read this Eckhart Tolle book, A New Earth, I saw it very clearly. My dad's a work addict. He's also a reading addict. He reads books to escape his emotions. You can tell that he's actually ignoring his environment, his present moment environment, because when you try and talk to him when he's reading, it takes you like 3 or 4 or 5 times saying, "Dad, Dad, Dad, Dad," while he's reading a book before he goes, "Huh?" So, he's completely engrossed in the fantasy world. And then he dismisses his books when he speaks about them as, "Oh, escapist trash." And I'm thinking, well, you do so much escapism. Why is that? Because you're trying to avoid the barrenness of your marriage, for one thing, and making any decisions about your emotional life. So I saw that really clearly. I saw that he was work addicted as well. He would go to work, and then he'd come home from work, be working at home in the evenings, and then when he wasn't working, he'd be watching TV and watching the rugby. And then when he wasn't watching the TV or the rugby, he would be exercising. So he was an exercise addict as well. So my dad was a massive addict for TV, work, and sport. and reading as well. So activity addict, basically. And all my family were activity addicts. I don't know whether I was an activity addict or not. I think I might have played the void character there. So that I might have been, because I was the depressed one, I was more addicted to thinking than to activities, if that makes sense. So I was more addicted, yeah, this is making sense now that I speak of it like this. I was more addicted to my internal world than the external world. I was more addicted to depressive thinking. So I would be focused more on thinking. I couldn't stop myself from thinking. And that was the way that I covered for my anxieties and my anguish. Hey, this video's good. This video's going really well. I'm actually starting to unpick my past a bit better. It's probably quite helpful that I've been reading this book called The Family by John Bradshaw. I mean, I read it ages ago, but it's just helped me, I think, find the right words to put everything around. And this is stuff I like. I already knew this stuff. I just hadn't been able to say it so clearly until now. So yeah, I think I was addicted to my internal world more than activities. I was addicted to thinking, and I was one of the feelers of the family. I think my brother was a feeler as well, like carrying the emotions of the family system. My mum is a disappearing act in my memory. She's there and then she's gone. She's always there and then gone. She's there and then she's gone. She's like a oblivion. She's just completely unpresent and completely avoidant of everything. It's almost as though she doesn't even exist. I know she's there in my memories, but what she's saying, I don't know. Who's she talking to? I don't know. You know, I can remember, I'm just thinking about like a typical kind of evening in the house where my dad would be in his big chair with his remote. We'd be watching a TV program together, some comedy program. My dad laughs, my brother laughs, I laugh. I don't know if my mum's laughing or not. I don't know whether she's there or not. You know, she is there, but I can't feel her being there, if that makes sense. I can't even see her. I know she's there, but I can't see that she's there. She does the cooking. I know that much. She does the cooking. But other than that, she's kind of a void. She is a void, and she avoids things. So she is only there in terms of physical, like providing physical stuff like food and clothes. But then she acts out with most anger and most distress when there's a conflict between her and my dad. She's the one who gets hysterical. She's the one who screams and shouts and bangs things and is an emotional terrorist during their arguments. And my dad is trying to suppress her. That's all I always remember my dad saying shush, 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 shush. Always trying to shush her. Trying to suppress her. Shush, shush, shush. And that just makes my mom go even more. So they had a horrible dynamic between them regarding conflict and fights. Yeah, so my psychosis was, in terms of family function, was a way to do various different things for the family. I was to break up the family, for one thing, because the family was not functional anymore. I realised that my mum and dad's marriage was based on nothing. There was no love there anymore. There was no tenderness. There was no care. There was not even any communication. This was something I realised growing up after a while, going through teenagerhood. I would tell my dad something or tell my mum something about my life that was fairly important, whether it's like, oh, you know, parents' evening coming up, for example, tell my dad that. And then, I don't know, the next day or something, I'd ask my mum if she was coming. She'd be like, what? I never heard anything about this. Because there was no communication between my mum and dad. And I always would be saying, like, well, don't you talk to each other? I've told dad. Is there no communication between you two? And what do you do in bed then? Do you just... And I know what they did in bed. They just sat there reading. I mean, lay there reading. Occasionally had sex, I suppose. I know they had sex because I heard it a couple of times, and that was distressing because one of the times I was masturbating while they were having sex. I'd already started, and then I started hearing them going at it, and I was like, oh God. So I don't know whether I carried on. I think I stopped. But it was just very, very distressing to hear my mum and dad having sex while I'd already started wanking, okay? So it's not like I heard them and I went, oh, better get cracking on a wank. No, I'd already started, and then they started going at it, and I just hid. And this was distressing as well. I couldn't hear which one was my dad and which one was my mum. My dad sounded like a girl, and my mum sounded like a girl, and that actually messed up my feeling of sex and gender and sexuality for a while. Honestly, that really didn't help the gay thing, because my understanding of sexuality and gender was so vulnerable at that time. I mean, I was being teased at school about being gay, and there's a massive homophobic culture at school about, massive homophobic culture at school. So my sexuality was rough, didn't know what it was really. And then this confusion coming in while I was already wanking, then I have my parents having sex, and I can't tell which one's my dad and which one's my mum. And so it was just a messed up experience, because if you think about it, I then was desperately afraid of ever thinking about my parents while I was masturbating. But because I had had an experience when my parents started having sex while I was masturbating, it meant that was there in my mind. It'd never been in my mind before then, but then it was in my mind, and I was constantly like afraid that I would start thinking about my parents while I was masturbating. So that was really difficult, because it really put a complex on my sexuality and a complex on my masturbation as well. And I think that's still there to some degree. Yeah. Anyway, so one of the functions of my psychosis period was to break up the family, break up the roles, bring about an authentic response in the family, break through the addictions. What else? Provide a real focal point of attention, a distraction, I suppose, from all their other addictions. To subvert the hierarchies and power positions. So I suppose in a way I became king for a while, because I had the control, because I was the anarchist. It was anarchy, it was chaos. It was madness. It was madness. So you could even look at it as like a power struggle between myself and my dad, vying for king position somehow, but vying to separate as well, vying to destroy this patriarchal bond. So I would do things like turning the TV off, take hold of the TV controller, unplug the TV, hide my dad's books, reading books, hide the keyboards to computers so they couldn't do work. I was really trying to highlight their addiction to them. And again, there's my mum. Like, where is my mum in all this? I'm not sure how I tried to do this with my mum, but it was really my dad who I was aggressive towards, because my dad was in the highest position of the family, and he had most structural control over people's minds. And I wanted to upset that balance so that people could find themselves more and live non-habitually, which means consciously deciding what you do spontaneously. So I played this role of trying to cut through falsehoods. But because the investment that my family had in their own roles, they didn't want to step outside of them. So it was convenient for them to blame me for their own responses, that I was causing their responses. And therefore, what created from that was me, just a different role for me. So it was, instead of creating an authentic family environment, I just changed roles. In fact, I just changed roles into the anarchist role, the psychotic role, the mad person role. So although I thought I was doing this liberation activity, all that happened was I changed up roles to be a mad scapegoat, a distraction, to bear the full force of the family's insanities, which were previously covered up by all their addictions. So by removing their addictions and by removing myself from the addiction to the role I'd been playing, and to play a non-role, an anarchical freedom, spiritual role, all I did was cause chaos in my family, put the attention on me all the time, and get myself in a whole load of fucking trouble. Yeah. But this is also why I'm hesitant to say that it was my psychosis. I don't think it was my psychosis. I would think it was a family dysfunction. It was a massive family dysfunction, a family psychosis, a family insanity. Because me outside of the family was very different to me inside of the family. My psychosis only happened in the context of the family system. I was weird and odd regarding other people, but I wasn't psychotic from their point of view. I was only psychotic in the family system because the family system brought out the worst of this anarchic role that I was playing. A chaos being. A diavolo. What's a diavolo? Let's have a look at that. I bet the thing's frozen. No, it hasn't frozen. That's good. Diavolo. Diavolo or diabolo? Oh. Word for devil. Italian word for devil. Yeah. So I slapped my dad because that was where things had got to. Tensions were so high, so much chaos, so much madness in all of us. Probably my brother had the least bit of madness in him. My mum was hysterical, screeched a lot, cried a lot, was verbally abusive a lot to me. My dad was a bully, a verbally abusive bully, shouting, very intimidating. My brother, I think he tried to keep out of it, but he would get involved. He was like my friend, who would occasionally kind of understand, and we'd have discussions that weren't heated. But it was just this massive conflict between my family and I. And I don't like the fact that I get all the blame for it as well. I get all the brunt of it. It's still told as, oh, you were psychotic, so that's why we behaved like that. Not like, oh, we were mad and you were psychotic. It always starts with it's Ross's fault. That's why their lives were ruined. And that's why they behaved that way. That they pin it on my behaviour without realising that they were playing their own character. They weren't playing my character. I was playing my character. They're responsible for their behaviour, not me. They're responsible for their actions. I didn't pull the words out of their mouths. I didn't reach into their heart and soul and pull out their feelings. I didn't move their arms and hands and physical bodies, and I didn't motivate them. They motivated themselves in response to me. So yeah. Okay, well, I slapped my dad. They take my passport because they didn't want me to leave the country. It was fairly likely that I would leave the country because I wanted to, and I'd come to get my passport so that I could leave the country. And they'd lied to me that they didn't have it, but they did have it, and I knew they had it. I just instinctively knew that it was clear that they had. I didn't know factually, but I knew intuitively. And they were lying to me, and I could just tell they were lying to me as well. That was even more infuriating. So my dad was getting up in my face and trying to calm me down in a way that wasn't going to calm me down at all. It's just trying to suppress me. And I slapped him. My brother jumped on me and pulled me apart from my dad. My mum went downstairs and called the police. And then the police came and brutally arrested me, hurting my arm and my back, bruising me and cutting me while doing so, handcuffed me, put me in the back of the police van, and I went to the police station, screamed my lungs out in the back of the police van. Stayed a night in the jail cell with the open door, but one police officer watching me the whole time in the open door. Had this assessment with this creepy fucking police officer, medical guy, in the morning, and then the community mental health team came to assess me for a section, and I got sectioned again. So remember, this is after I'd already escaped from Ward 10 in Wexham Park Hospital previously, and I'd been in the wilderness at my friend Rowan's house for 28 days or so. I'd seen Andrea, met up with her. I'd been foraging around in the woods, in the wilderness, and just messing about, basically. Yeah, and peeing out of the roof window, stuff like that. And so when I got sectioned onto a section 3, because I'd already been on a section 2, but I got put on a section 3. I might have been put on section 2 very briefly, and then it was upgraded to a section 3 very quickly. Anyway, so that meant that I was taken to Ward 12 because there was no beds available in Ward 10 anymore. The police dropped me off in the ward, said goodbye to them, and then I was on the ward. So we're just repeating the same stuff again. But I just think that I guess I needed to review how I got to that position again, because it's like I was just talking about, I've been in the ward and telling you about the ward and stuff, and it's like I need to keep the connecting tissue together, like as how these things have happened over time, through the story, because it needs context. If I just keep talking about being in the ward, then I feel like I've lost, where did I come from? How did I get here? That kind of feeling. So there you go. I'll leave it at that for the moment, but that's a more in-depth look at like the family dynamics behind the period in my life that we could call the family psychosis. family dysfunction. Yeah. And I'm still in the wake of the family dysfunction. I still live with my mum. This is part of the family dysfunction. I shouldn't be living with my mum. You know, I need to separate from my mum. I need to have my own independence. But this is part of the family dysfunction. There's something between me and my mum that is unresolved that prohibits me from leaving her. Some abandonment issue. I'm afraid of abandoning her. I tend to lose energy as I move towards abandoning her. I tend to lose motivation as I move towards becoming independent. So it's like a push me pull you thing. Like I move towards independence, and something my mum says or the way my mum behaves starts to pull my energy down, so I can't do it. And then I rise up and I just pull down again. So it's like approach avoidance. I'm also a little bit scared of living by myself, but that fear is promoted by my mum and was there from the past, where my mum tends to put problem suggestions into the future. How are you going to handle this? How are you going to deal with that? Oh, the problem with that is this. The problem with you moving there is this. The problem with going there is this. The problem with leaving me is this. So it puts all these psychological barriers and blocks on my independence, which have a very subtle effect. I'm not sure if they're still operational or whether it's just a hangover. She used to do it all the time. It hasn't really happened for a long time. So maybe I'm just kind of still living in the conditioning from years and years of roadblocks being put in my way. And I don't see that they're being put in my way now, but I'm still thinking of it in those ways, if that makes sense, because it's been conditioned for so long. So one of my goals at the moment is I'm revisiting the family material, the book The Family, by John Bradshaw, with a view to uncoupling from my mum, because I'm basically a surrogate spouse at the moment. I'm living in the position of a spouse. It's my mum, I'm the male, and she's the female. We live in a house together. We make decisions together. It's kind of icky in a way. So I'm playing the role of a spouse. And I shouldn't be, and it's gross, and it's weird. So I've started to kind of like promote my mum towards getting a boyfriend, because if she gets a boyfriend, that will take me out of the spouse role even more. So that would be good. And if I can get a girlfriend, then that takes me out of the spouse role even more. So that's good. But I think that possibly the fact that I live with my mum is something that it fucks with my relationships with women, because, and I don't know exactly how, but there's something subconscious there. Like my mum is the primary woman in my life, so maybe I sabotage my relationships because I know that if I move out with a girl or be with a woman long term, that I will be abandoning my mum by doing that. So the tie to my mum is really strong, and I hate it. I hate that that is the case, and I don't know how to get out of it. One of the things I actually avoid facing it as well, because it's quite painful and it's very draining to face the connection that I have with my mum. Well, it's a topic that I avoid in my writing. I cover every other topic apart from my mum. I find my mum the most difficult topic to discuss in my own personal writing, my journal writing. So I'll talk about my money, my career, my art, my music, my writing, what I'm doing in my books, my relationships. I'll talk about all that stuff. And I'll occasionally put my mum on the list, and it's so hard to do it. It just drains me immediately, and I don't want to face it as well. I think that because I know that if I face it, then my life will change, and I'm scared of my life changing. I'm so comfortable here that although I'm comfortable, I'm comfortably frustrated. So I'm comfortable in one sense, but I'm frustrated because I live with my mum. I don't have my own independence. I don't have my own income supply. I don't have my own lifestyle. I have a lifestyle that's still part of the family. It's a family lifestyle. It's not my own. And to the degree that I'm connected to my mum, the less I have my own life. And I think I am afraid to actually face that relationship in myself. I'm afraid to face it with her, certainly, but I'm afraid to face it myself as well. To actually talk about it, to journal about it, to write about it. What is that relationship? Yeah, so that's something that I need to put on the list now, because I've actually run out of stuff somewhat to write about. I need to face this primary relationship, me and my mum, so that I can move things forward there, as in move myself away from her. Anyway, that's been Fieros' story time. Thank you for being my counsellor, my therapist, for listening to me. I don't know if that's of any use to you as a person, whether that stimulates thought or what, or if it's just me getting my narcissistic needs fulfilled by talking to myself on the camera. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting this channel. And I do hope that there's something that you can see in my story that relates to yours. Otherwise, it is just me being narcissistic. But if there's something you get from it, that's awesome. Yeah, okay. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.